an awful night for race control. I'm going to talk about another moment of the race that just absolutely killed the trajectory of where this race was going to. But as an official, to come out post race and openly admit that Hamlin rolled early, that it was a quote unquote bang bang call, is just utterly stupid, in my opinion. It was confusing on the broadcast because Fox is saying that NASCAR, the restart was not under review. They accepted it as a clean restart. And then post race, in speaking with reporters, Elton Sawyer said that they did, in fact, review the restart, deemed it was clean. I don't know which is correct, but the one thing I do know is with these restart violations, when we know when NASCAR rather knows or deems that something is fishy, we know it's under review by the time cars hit the backstretch. I mean, there was a review in the Xfinity race. I believe it was Almirola. I forget who else it was. It was probably Chandler Smith or another Toyota. But there was a restart there that was under review. It was clearly accepted after the fact, but as soon as cars hit the backstretch, NASCAR is reviewing the restart, and there it is. Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned, Elton Sawyer goes out on Sirius XM, and my biggest issue with this, why I think it's utterly stupid and almost reckless to talk about this moment in this way, is he says, quote, "There's no doubt he," being Denny Hamlin, "rolled early. If this happens at lap 10 or 50 or 300, the call would have been different." What? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, why are these decisions based on circumstance? And right now, at this moment, over time, where the stakes are highest, you're just going to let them go? Like, in what scenario, why would you call the restart differently if it were a different part of the race? That is like absolutely ridiculous to me, because a rule is a rule. Like, on paper, it's black and white. So to openly admit you would call it differently at a different moment of the race seems ridiculous to me. Like,
yeah, it's really fit. I know. I totally feel it. When I heard that, I was like, at least he was honest about it. But that opens up an entire can of like, oh, this completely exposes like certain other things that may happen during a race, like how they call certain calls, not just on restarts, but maybe on pit road or anything. Like, we know, like, sometimes they, something will happen on the track during a green flag pit cycle, and they'll say, oh, they're going to hold off on the caution or just not throw one at all, so they don't interrupt the flow of how strategy goes. Of course, that was blown out with, Kyle Busch, and what happened with that yellow that took away a whole bunch of strategy plays that were happening. But with this restart zone, like, yeah, it should be 100% every single time it happens, it gets called, especially when no doubt there was a violation that occurred. Him saying that reminded me of a huge confusion. 2008 at Talladega. I'm sure you remember Regan Smith going below the yellow line, and Andy Petrie and Dale Jarrett, like, I think it's legal on the last lap. They think that the rules are going to change given the circumstances. If it's the last lap, then there's this no rules apply. And for here, like, you see somebody who does something, and you can see it on your screen from TV. Like, you can see that he rolled early, and the driver saw it. Even Denny, you can tell he's trying to kind of sugarcoat it and go like, I went early.
He's saying it without saying it, but no doubt, clear as day.
Yeah,
rolled early, jumps the restart, and again, like the fact that all of this came out after the race, and there was no real clear estimate as to when NASCAR was truly reviewing it, if they did truly review it, like, just shows that they weren't even thinking about it, in my opinion. Because again, like, these restart calls are called as soon as they happen, as soon as they see something, it's under review, and we didn't get that. And to just, to say that you would call it differently under different circumstances is just absolutely insane to me. And the one thing about NASCAR that's different from every other sport in these situations is that it does not have the luxury of calling a timeout, stopping the race to review a call, right? These are split-second decisions that happen real time, bang, bang calls, and it's like you're calling balls and strikes. So it's human nature to get things wrong. It's not always going to be right or wrong. But when we continue to talk about the inconsistency of being consistent with calling these things, and in a race where it wasn't just the restart, you mentioned the Kyle Busch wreck in stage 2 that was deemed caution, which we'll talk about it in a minute because, again, just changed the complexion of this race, is just crazy to me. And now we have to worry about this moving forward because it's a slippery slope where if we get some overtime restarts on short tracks now, drivers are going to push the issue. They're going to try and find that edge, and they're going to try and pull NASCAR's hand into making them make a decision or not. And it just creates an extreme slippery slope to continue to be inconsistent, to continue to, I don't know if it's manufactured drama or whatever, but just continued to put us in these unfortunate situations where we're in a race that was just bad from top to bottom. We're now just spending days talking about this. Get the rule book out. If you're going to make decisions, make them by the book. And let's not have these conversations. It's frustrating, it's infuriating, and it's extremely irresponsible, I believe, when you have the people at the top of the sport saying these things. Why have the rule in place then? Just make it, make it a game time decision. I don't know, dude. It's extremely frustrating. But the complexion of this race was just extremely frustrating because we talk about that caution from stage 2. That is my high stakes moment from the race. I mean, NASCAR elected to throw this caution for Kyle Busch. He barely scraped the wall, which totally killed the strategy element of this race. And I want to talk about or mention Denny Hamlin's comments. He talked about this on Actions Detrimental this week and says, quote, he basically, I feel like, defending NASCAR in this sense, which I don't agree with. But here's what he says. He says, quote, people were pitting when they thought it was best for them to pit, whether it be to get tires or maybe they're starting to slow down, whatever it might be. Stop right there. We want to see that. Like, I want to see guys go off strategy. We're not just waiting for a typical green flag cycle. I want to see these guys and these teams put the strategy in their own hands. Be different, because that is what Richmond has been built on. It's called the action track. It should be renamed to the strategy track because that's the only selling point that this track has had for the last X amount of years or so. And fans were drooling over the strategy at Bristol a few weeks ago. Drooling over that. Was it really that necessary to be quick with the trigger here when Kyle Busch clearly was still rolling? And even on the broadcast, the broadcast crew was, unsure as to what that caution was for. Was it for Kyle Busch? Was it for something else? So, I digress there, but we want to see that strategy. This is where it gets interesting. Hamlin continues, says, I think that's why they threw this caution. It wasn't going to trap a lot of cars a lap down. They saw a car up against the wall. I don't know if they're really thinking about, well, who's on pit road? Who's going to get screwed by this? They don't have time to really think about that. They just saw a car up at the wall and threw a caution. They knew it wasn't right in the middle of a green flag cycle. Why would you throw cautions because you're worried about trapping people lap down? Number one, like a caution is a caution for a reason. You should not be throwing cautions based on who's getting trapped lap down, who's getting screwed. That's just part of racing, and that's part of the sport, dude. You can't predict that stuff. So why are you even doing that in the first place if they truly are? Again, it's interesting to me because I feel like NASCAR hasn't been so quick trigger with cautions recently. I feel like, they've let things kind of pan out. We haven't seen really many single car spins called for cautions if drivers can get back down to the apron, if they can keep going. I feel like they've been more willing to let it ride and see what happens. So if they called this caution just to get a break from what the action was, because there wasn't any quote unquote action on the track, strategy should result in action. We don't get these strategy races, very often anymore. And it's never going to be on the level that Bristol was a couple weeks ago with the tire wear, but still, we want to see strategy. Like, that's a part of this sport, a part of the race that is not necessarily appreciated much anymore, because all we're talking about is raw speed, and all we're talking about is guys that are running up front. Like, we want to see the pit strategy, and it didn't kill Larson's day. He was able to rally back and get a good finish. But Bubba, Bowman, Todd Gilliland was never even mentioned for the rest of the damn race after that pit strategy was shattered. And everybody was going to, they were going to run a two-stop strategy. We were never going to get a one-stop strategy anymore. So it's unfortunate. This race, again, was not good. From the broadcast to just watching it, it was not a great race. And then to get the typical NASCAR caution with 4 to go, and then we get an overtime restart just to kill everything. And with its controversy in itself, like, it was just a really, really unfortunate turn of events. And I don't know, dude, like, the inconsistencies with race control, like, this was as bad as it's gotten, as at least from what I've seen. And I don't know where we go from here, because now it's confusing. There are so many different levels to these things now, and it's going to be really tough to move forward, because we don't know what the precedent is. When we think there's precedent, there's not precedent. But I'm going to get off my soapbox here and let you chime in, because I got nothing else to say. I'm just incredibly disappointed with the product that we've gotten, and especially after the start of this season. It's been a dream start to the year, from race, the racing, to the storylines of what's been going on in the race, and this just I feel like killed so much of it, because all we're talking about is what was clearly wrong, what should have been called. And I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel you, but I if stuff like this was incredibly common, I would be far more on that soapbox side. There's certain parts of it that definitely irk at me. The restart was definitely the bigger one, because it was something that they even called out themselves. And when you put the line on that racetrack, I feel like that drastically changed how we are supposed to police that restart zone. Once you put a line, that line's supposed to be there for a reason, right? Like, it wasn't always there. And in recent years, they've made the zone a little bit bigger. But I heard Dale Jr. say, if they're going to do it like this and not be like straight black and white with that line, just take it out. Just keep the line on the wall, and then just keep it. I don't know how that would help, because people are still going to be working on that line, and eventually people are going to get called. And just as a fan, you're watching it, you're like, did he? The fans aren't going to know, really. It's going to be a lot more difficult to tell. And then the drivers are going to keep going back and back and back. But I mean, Denny had good points in regards to what it's like to lead going into a restart zone. In a way, you're actually not the control car. In a way, you're actually on a disadvantage, because you see the replay and you see Joey kind of leading up into the 11, which that in itself should be a penalty, in my opinion. Yeah. It's all about keeping a consistent pace, right, leading up into the zone. So I feel like the 22 should have been penalized as well, because that's all you can literally see it, and they have the throttle. The throttle gauge and all that. They see
all the data at their disposal.
They do, and they can see
everything here.
Yeah, the speedometer. They can see, if Denny's backing up, and that's why they're coming forward. Sometimes it's hard to look at two guys on the front row and see, because you don't know what each other's doing. But when you put a line on the road, like you're setting yourself up for having to police it pretty straightforward. And when they don't. And then when they go on and they straight up say, oh, if this was 20 laps earlier or 50 laps earlier, we would have called it differently. That's definitely really tough. But I know the Kyle Busch caution, that, I mean, that's just since day one in the sport. I feel like there's yellows that are called that maybe should have been called, or maybe they were called too soon, too early. Was there, did somebody see a piece of debris on the track? Did he straighten it out and get going? Did it cost somebody else other time? Was there cars on pit road? many times, as I said, there's been green flag pit stops and an incident will happen and they'll let it go. Or there will be a tire carcass, down by the apron, and they'll wait until everyone cycles through before the yellow. And I understand why they do that, but as you said, a yellow's a yellow. And I think if there's a piece of danger, or if one of the track officials by the catch fence, if they see something that stands out, I prefer when they call it safe, because I think the conversation flips on its head when we don't call it yellow and then something more significant happens. We've had guys hit pieces of debris that the track officials missed, and there was a lot of damage to race cars, and that's an even bigger conversation. So I definitely don't see it as manufactured drama. I've always felt like a caution is called for a reason. Now, what that reason is, that's where the debate can start, and I'm open to that. But I don't see this as something that happens far enough to where I'm worried about next week. I think the restart zone, that's going to be a big topic. I'm going to be at Martinsville, and we're going to be asking the drivers. Every driver is going to be asked about, okay, guys, what do you restart? What are you going to do? Do you know what to do? During the drivers meeting, are you guys going to be waving your hand? They usually don't ask questions anymore, but I know when Ryan Newman used to race, he's always known as the guy who would raise his hand and kind of keep them honest on certain rules that they're inconsistent about. He's not around anymore, but I think there's enough guys who are going to ask them, what the hell are we supposed to, what do you want us to do? Okay. Because this is all about what you guys are looking at. So that's going to be a huge story, and rightfully so.